loving well and living generously. That is when Ocean Hills is at its best. Loving ourself or loving yourself, the purpose is that then you become less conscious of yourself. You develop this confidence, this security, this sense of, I know who I am and I know whose I am. And that does something inside of me that now allows me to live with much greater freedom so that I can love my neighbor. Does that make sense? Are you with me on that? And that's why it's so important that we get this right, that we figure out who we are and we grow and learn to love who we are. And yet we live in a culture, and you know this, you read about it, you struggle with it, I struggle with it, where we don't always take care of ourselves in the healthiest of ways. We make self-destructive choices. We get caught up in addiction. We end up making decisions that aren't in our best interests or in the best interests of those around us. And so this morning, what I want us to think about are maybe some gauges. Think of the word gauge. When you think of the word gauge, I think of my dashboard on my car. Some of you know I drove a Saab for 10 years, this Saab convertible, but it was done. You ever have a car, it died. It was just done. It was leaking oil. The mechanic said, I wouldn't put another dime into this. So we got rid of it. One of the reasons it got to that place, you talk to my friends, dude, you didn't take care of that car. You never changed the oil. Like you instead of every 3,000 to 5,000 miles, you change it every 10,000 miles, and you never got your wheels aligned, so you're always having to change tires way more frequently than you're supposed to. The temperature gauge, the engine lights on. When you think about a car and you think about gauges, the gauges are there to help us see that the car's in a good place, a healthy place. And hey, if the gas tank's on empty, you fill the tank. If you need coolant, it says, hey, add coolant, you add coolant. Well, I wouldn't do that. It'd say add coolant, and I go, it's fine. And what happens? If you don't maintain a car, it dies. And part of, I think, what I want us to think about this morning are what are the gauges in your life that help you determine your own health? That help you to love yourself, that help you to think about your own life and say, am I in the danger zone? Am I vulnerable to making decisions that are unhealthy, that could sabotage my most important relationships? This is super important when we think about this morning, because how we care for ourselves in ministry, they call it self-care. That ministers that don't take care of themselves can become toxic people, can become power-hungry people, can become at risk of making really bad decisions that create a train wreck, not only for themselves, but their family, for the church. And so this idea of self-care is really an important issue for all of us, not just for those of us on staff, but it's about being a healthy person. And so I want to have us look at 4 gauges that I look at in my own life over time. And I'm doing this more and more the older I get. I'm finding that I need to do this more and more. And so if you're taking notes, let me just give you the 4 areas and then we'll talk about them. We'll just kind of have a conversation about them this morning. The gauges are spiritual, physical, relational, and moral. Spiritual, physical, relational, and moral. And maybe just at the outset I can say, as I read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you know what I've discovered when I look at the person of Jesus? Jesus took care of himself. Jesus was a person who was busy, who was engaged fully in life, who was loving others generously. He was loving his neighbor generously. But he knew who he was. He knew whose he was. He had a clear sense of margin in his life, boundaries in his life. He knew when to say no. He knew who to say no to. He wasn't afraid of offending some people. in order to care for himself so he could be the best he could be when he needed to be out there. Does that make sense? You read, especially the first 5 chapters of Mark, and you'll discover one of the distinctives of Mark's gospel is the language that Mark uses is there's this kind of movement that's happening. Jesus is on the move. He's on the go. It's immediately this happened, and then this, and he's healing, and he's ministering, and he's helping people, and he's gathering his team, and there's a whole lot of life happening around him. And then you find these pockets of Jesus disengaging, removing himself, going up to the mountain to pray alone early in the morning, disengaging to connect with his Father in heaven. And so this morning, I want us to look at these gauges in our life so that we can be people who engage fully in life, who love generously like Jesus, but also that we create clear boundaries and margin and me time, not in a selfish way, but in a self-care way that you become a life-giving friend, a life-giving husband, wife, a life-giving roommate, a healthy person that can actually love your neighbor because you have something to give. And so let's just go after the first gauge that we need to keep an eye on. It's the spiritual gauge. Here's my question. Is the voice of God, His grace and truth, is it getting louder in your life? Are you hearing that He's crazy about you? That He loves you? That there's nothing you can do to make Him love you more or less, but He looks at you as His child, His daughter, His son. And He's smitten with you. He longs to spend time with you. He's not thinking less of you because you're struggling. He's not going to make you feel guilty because you haven't been in touch with Him. He can't wait to hang out, to spend time, to have you reach out. I love that verse in James where it says, draw near to God and He will draw near to you. Draw near to God and He will draw near to you. Let me ask you a question. We live in a culture where there are many, many voices telling us who we are, telling us that we don't measure up, telling us that we're too fat, we're too skinny, we're too ugly, we're not athletic enough, we aren't rich enough, we're not, all of these things. We're not enough, we're not enough, we're not enough. Every day you wake up, you're being bombarded by those voices. And over time, and over the years, and over a lifetime, those influence us. They influence me. I hear those voices, I try to shut them out, but they do impact me. The question that we have to ask is, whose voice is the loudest in our life? Whose voice really has the authority? Whose voice do we trust? Whose voice are we listening to? Are we allowing to impact how we think, that we're allowing to shape the way we think? The voice of God in the Old and New Testament is shouting to you that you are His beloved child. That you are deeply, deeply, deeply loved by God. And I guess the question I want to ask you is, are you engaged in a healthy relationship with the living God, with His Son, Jesus Christ? Are you hearing that voice? Jesus models that for us. He hears the voice of God. He listens to the voice of God. He's always connecting with that relationship with His Father. I and the Father are one. There was this sense of deep connection. He knew who He was. He had this strength, this confidence, right? Where did that come from? It came from knowing that He was the Son, deeply connected to His Father. I think there are many of us that feel unimportant, that feel insignificant, that feel unlovable. And so that's why this is so important. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, just write that down. Paul reminds us that we are God's, what's the word? What's it say? For we are God's masterpiece. Masterpiece. Work of art. One of a kind. Priceless, original. Do you believe that? I want you to just soak in that for one moment. Do I believe that I am a one-of-a-kind, priceless original? There are no other John Irelands. There's nobody quite like me. Not in an arrogant, cocky way, in a way where deep down I know that I'm valued. I know that I'm special to God. And I feel loved by Him. And therefore, I am able and capable to see value in myself, to love myself, the unique gifts He's given me, personality He's given me, ... This is so important. In learning to love other people, we have to discover that we are loved by our Father in heaven. And many of us have heard a different voice from our earthly fathers that have impacted the way we see ourselves. And we go through life overcompensating, right? Today, I hope, if you hear nothing else, that this spiritual issue of knowing that I'm not worthless, I'm not useless, I'm not pathetic. Some of you, that's what you heard growing up. You're useless, you're pathetic. And so that's the voice you hear. And so that's the inner dialogue that goes on. But there's a different voice that whispers, I love you. You're mine. You're valuable. You're priceless. You're one of a kind. You're an original. I have plans for you. I have a purpose for you. Will you keep checking in with me? I love, I know many of you read Jesus Calling. And just a couple days ago, I love the first two lines on November 14th. Sarah Young writes this, but it's this. If you don't have it, it's written like as if God were speaking to you. It's the voice of God as you read it. So listen to these words. Bask in the luxury of being fully understood and unconditionally loved. Dare to see yourself as I see you. Dare to see yourself as God sees you. You're a one-of-a-kind, priceless, original. That's how He sees you. So let me ask you in the spiritual gauge, are you deeply connected to your Heavenly Father as you sit here this morning? Scale of 1 to 10. 1, you're going, I haven't talked to God in years. 10, dude, we're tight. I am just authentic. I'm transparent with God. I'm deeply connected. I have this ongoing, life-giving relationship with Jesus. Where are you in terms of your gauge spiritually? Are you empty? Are you full? And then, where do you want to be? That'd be the next question I'd love to ask you. Where do you want to be when you walk out of here today? Where do you want to be? Do you want to be close to God? Do you want Him to fill your tank, to fill your reserves, to fill you with love so that you see yourself as He sees you? And then what's it going to take to get there? What's it going to take to get you to move from where you are to where you want to be? Are you willing to begin to make some changes so you hear His voice? You trust His voice. His voice becomes the authority in your life, not the radio, not the television, not Madison Avenue, but His voice is the one you trust. I think this is so significant for us in terms of learning to love ourselves. Spiritual is that first gauge to pay attention to. The next one is physical. And here's the question. Is your pace sustainable? The way you're living your life right now, physically. I don't know what time you wake up. I don't know what time you go to bed. I don't know how many meetings you have during the day. But as you think about your life, is your pace sustainable, or are you on a pace to burn out? Are you on a pace to just kind of spin out of control, to run out of gas? Again, I look at Mark's gospel and I see this person that we know, Jesus Christ. He's on the move. He's helping people. He's relationally engaged. He's living a high-impact life. It's really actually quite extraordinary to think about who He is and how He lived. But the one thing that jumps out at me as I continue to read is His ability to make gutsy choices and decisions of self-care, that he's able to take time to rest, to sleep, believe it or not. Look at, I think we have it, Mark chapter 4:38. He's out on a boat in the Sea of Galilee with his friends. It's been a busy time, a hectic time. And it says Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" Why did they do that? Because earlier it says that a storm came up. So he's in the back of the boat sleeping while there's a storm. Now just think about that for a minute. And his disciples come to him and say, "Don't you care?" What I love about this, and there's a book that's been written, and I can't remember the title, but it's all about the back of the boat. And it's all about making sure you have back of the boat time, where you make a choice. I'm not going to be out there on the boat just with everyone. I'm going to pull away and I'm going to sleep. I'm going to take a nap. I'm going to go to bed early. I'm going to pull away and get the rest that I need, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. It's part of self-preservation. It's part of what helped Jesus, who was fully human and fully God, but he was fully human, like you, like me. He needed rest. Can you sustain the pace that you're on? I don't know your life, but are you getting the rest that you need? Let's think about some other areas when it comes to the physical. What about exercise? I know for some of you it's like, oh, don't bring that up. And this is not about guilt, but again, you know, when you read through the Gospels, I mean, Jesus wasn't driving a car. He was walking everywhere. He was walking, hiking up mountains. I mean, that part of his life was physical. Now, we don't read that he was running 10K races and taking yoga and stuff like that, but he was taking care of himself. And here, I guess here's my question to you. When you think of, you know, there are so many, I mean, my gosh, we're inundated with all of these programs about how to take care of yourself physically and all these diets and this and that. And here's what I know. Here's actually a few things that I know. Number one, this church is filled with a lot of fitness trainers. If you're going, dude, if you're making excuses, come and talk to me. I can point you to a handful of trainers in this church that would love to help you. We have physical therapists. If you got nagging injuries and that's your excuse, you're always going, yeah, I can't. We have people that they're experts, physical therapists that can help you rehab and get better so you quit making those excuses. We have people that are yoga instructors. I went to a yoga class yesterday. It was like one of the hardest things I've ever done, man. It was so like, well, okay. I am telling, now I know some of you are going, well, yoga, could you be a Christian and do yoga? Yes, you can. All right? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I know there are some people who get freaked out by that, but I think they go to other churches, so I'm not going to say anything else. But this issue of, I get myself in trouble. I am so sorry. This issue of taking care of yourself physically, it's not rocket science. All I know, and I'll tell you that, this is what I'm trying to practice, that I'm learning as I read, as I talk to people, I have conversations. What's the secret? The secret is you do have to exercise. I'm not saying you got to go run a marathon, but you got to walk. You got to move. Your body needs to move. You got to exercise at some level. And you got to eat well. You know, the old saying, small portions. You know, if you eat, don't go back for fifths or fourths, you know. But smaller portions, get sleep and eat well. You'll be a healthy person physically. But I'm dead serious. If you want help in this area, quit making excuses, quit blaming your circumstances. Come and talk to me or our staff, and we'll point you to people that will help you, that go to this church in this area. And then, of course, when you think about, what about margin? What about, do you have times where you shut your brain off? You physically, you turn off your cell phone, you turn off your email. Do you have margin in your life where you pull away from people to recharge your spiritual and physical batteries? I'm up here as one that's learning to do this. I and many of you know, I've been through seasons of my life where I experienced some depression, where I experienced some burnout. And this was really fresh for me, what we're talking about this morning. How did I allow myself to get to these places where I was at risk of ruining my life and the lives of many other people? It's really, really important to think about creating margin in your life that allows you to say yes to what's important, loving yourself and caring for yourself. Well, you're going to have to say no to some other opportunities and other people. You don't have to serve on 30 boards. Some of you folks that are like, man, I got to serve on this board and that. That's great. Go serve on, but you don't need to serve on 20 of them. Serve on one board, 2 boards. Some of us are overcommitted. We say yes to this and yes to that. And what I would push on you right now is why and what is it in me that has to say yes to all of these opportunities that come my way? What is it in me that is preventing me from saying no? What holds me back from saying, Tom, sorry, I can't do that? And have a healthy conversation. Tom says, hey, I want you to go to Haiti with me. And I want to go to Haiti, but you know what? I can't do it. But I'm going to say yes because I don't want to hurt Tom's feelings. I'm going to say yes because, and then maybe I can't afford it. I don't have the time. And now I'm on the Haiti trip and I'm going, why am I on the Haiti trip, man? I can't afford it. I don't have time. I'm tired. Now I'm sick. And that's how we live our lives. And what I love about what we're talking about this morning is we have to learn how to care for ourselves spiritually, physically, and let me jump to the next one. Relational health. Loving yourself. Let me ask you this. Is your love increasing? Just think about your life from a year ago, from 5 years ago. Would you say your capacity to love others, to love your spouse, to love your kids, to love your roommates, to love your friends, is your heart growing larger? Healthy followers of Jesus, we're becoming more like Him. Our capacity to love is growing if we're healthy. If we're learning to love ourselves. But if we find ourselves walking around more and more self-conscious, thinking about what you're thinking about me, which is probably nothing. You're not thinking about me, but I think you're thinking something negative about me, right? When we get all caught up in that stuff, we're self-conscious, we get paranoid, we become preoccupied with ourself. And then, of course, there's drama around our life. If I'm feeling more and more bitter, resentful, fragile, my feelings seem to be getting hurt more often. I seem to have more and more misunderstandings at work, at home. I'm feeling more and more alone. If that's you this morning, you got to pay attention to that gauge, that relational gauge in your life. If you're not in a place where you're going, I don't really have any friends. I don't have life-giving conversations and relationships in my life anymore. I did when I was in junior high, man. I had my buddies, but now I don't. If you're in that place, that's not a healthy place. And so you got to pay attention to that. You got to listen, and then you got to have the courage and the guts to say, what is going on inside of me? How did I get here? What do I need to change? To love myself in such a way that I can be in healthy relationships at home, at work, in the community, at church. Are you with me on that? But you got to have the guts to be able to look at yourself, to become self-aware. Is there something that I'm doing that's alienating me? Is there an abrasiveness about me? Is there something about me that's controlling? I have to have my way all the time. And having the guts to deal with this issue is being willing to ask those, your most important relationships. Just ask them. Say, I'll give you permission to speak into my life. I'm feeling like I'm in a place in my life where I'm not emotionally experiencing intimate relationships, closeness, friends. I'm not having any fun anymore. Pay attention to that gauge if that's where you're at this morning. Again, you read the Gospels, Jesus had these guys in his life. John chapter 13, it says that he loved his companions. He loved these guys during his time on earth. In fact, in another place, he says, he says, I call you friends. I no longer call you servants. You're my friends. I'm letting you know everything. There's this disclosure, this transparency that Jesus, when we're transparent, there's something in us that feels good about ourselves, right? When the more we love ourselves, the more we feel secure about ourselves, the more I can be transparent with you. When I'm paranoid and I'm living a secret life and then I'm more guarded. I'm more like, how you doing? I'm great. And I might be dying in a pile. If I say I'm great and it's my closest friends that are asking me, that's an issue. And I just love, again, learning from Jesus, because if you read the Gospels, you realize he had this margin, this boundary in his life where he got away with his friends. Let me ask you a question. Who's responsible for this in your life? Who's responsible for you to make friendship time, for you to go on a date with your husband or your wife, for you to spend time, quality time with your kids? Whose responsibility is that to make that decision so that you live that way? It's yours, yeah. And when it comes to being, taking care of your body, physical, the temple, whose responsibility is that? It's yours. When it comes to your relationship with God, whose responsibility is that? You have to open yourself to him. He's pursuing you. He's initiating. But you have to be open to that. And then the last area is the moral area. And here's the question. Is my character developing? Am I developing Christ-like character in my life? Am I making good, healthy decisions between right and wrong? See, I get in trouble in my life when those lines, those black and white lines that are super clear, when I start making them gray, that's a warning sign on the gauge of my dashboard. That's a red light flashing. When I start making decisions that put me in danger of compromising my reputation, my character, my integrity. What does that look like? And my wife, Natalie, and I, we had a conversation about this. I said, help me think about what are those kind of dilemmas that people get into, those moral decision-making dilemmas that maybe can compromise. If you don't want to hear it, you might close your ears right now. My wife had some really good ones. She said, what about when we use someone else's address to get our kids into a better school in this town? How about not repaying money that I owe to a friend, and then I go and I take Natalie to Hawaii on vacation? And my friend's going, dude, you owe me money. Pay me back. What are you taking your wife to Hawaii for without paying me back? You don't do that. Lying to my wife about where I've been because I just had a 3-hour lunch with a woman that I find attractive, and we're beginning to develop an emotional bond. Lying about the age of my kids so I can get a cheaper price into Disneyland. How many of you done that? Cheating on a test. Cheating on your spouse. I mean, we could just... And this isn't about legalism, but you know what it's about? It's about the gauge. It's about the moral compass or gauge in your heart. And when I start sliding, it's a slippery slope. Once I start compromising on those character issues, once I find myself having a 3-hour lunch with a woman that I find attractive, that's not smart for any of us that are married if you're a guy. And you just go through all of these. Once you start compromising on these decisions where it's clear, but we rationalize and we make excuses for why it's okay, we justify our behavior, that's a dangerous place for us to be. And so one of the ways we love ourselves is we're clear about what God has said is right and wrong, and we're following him. And there's a kind of momentum that develops in my life when I'm making good, healthy decisions. That builds momentum in my life. I have a little more swagger in my life as I walk because I'm doing the right thing, I'm living the right way, I'm making healthy choices. And when I'm not doing that, I lack confidence. I lack this sense of knowing who I am. Again, not in a cocky way, in a really healthy way. In a way that can love and give to others and sacrifice for others. That's the call. Love your neighbor as yourself. This morning's message is really, hopefully, a challenge and encouragement to have you take care of yourself. So I've given you 4 gauges. My question to you is, what's your takeaway? What's the one gauge that we talked about today that you're going, I need to pay attention to that? God really got my attention this morning. You know, you could be doing great spiritually. You got a 5-hour quiet time every day. And you could be poisoning your body physically and, weigh 1,500 pounds, ready to have a heart attack, filled with cholesterol issues. And you get what I'm saying? You have to pay attention. All of these are really important areas to learning to love yourself so that you can love other people. That's the point. The point is not love yourself so you can be, hey, look at me. It's so that when I learn to love myself, now I have the capacity to live and love generously. So let's close in prayer. And take just a moment. What is the gauge that maybe is in the danger zone for you this morning? Maybe you've been making some self-destructive choices or have some self-destructive habits, and God said, today can be the day that your life changes. Today's the day I want you to hear my voice and let it be the authoritative voice. Father, this message this morning applies to every single one of us, including me. I want to be a healthy person. I want to be a life-giving husband and father and pastor and friend. But I know that this self-care issue is one that I cannot and must not ignore. Give me the courage, the strength, and the guts to make the tough choices. To make time to nurture my relationship with you. To make time to give and pour into my most important relationships and friendships. To create margin in my life, to take care of myself physically, to exercise, and to get the rest that I need. And then, Lord, when I come to a crossroads on moral decisions, give me the guts to make the right choice. And I can't do that on my own. Paul reminds us that we can't do that in Romans 7. The good we want to do, we don't do. There's this wrestling in us. But by your grace and by the power of the Spirit that works within us, that you've put inside of us, that Spirit and that grace can give us the courage and the strength to live a healthy life, to love ourselves. And so we say, Lord, we need you. We can't do this without you. We cannot do this without you. And so fill us afresh and anew this day.